What's good with the YouTube Converse perspective, man? It's your boy, Big Flacco. Smashing, dashing, sliding on through. As you already know, little bit of energy, man. What we're going to be talking about today is Rojo came across some really good information about the NF's history. I haven't peeped it out yet, man, but I'm going to take Rojo at his word, man. We're going to get straight to it. We're going to jump in with a little bit of perspectives, a little bit of different ideas to it, man. Without further ado, Rojo's going to get to it.
Yeah, a lot of y'all been asking about the real history as we're taught it within the prison systems and the shoes and the holes and whatnot. And now don't get it twisted. Not everybody will always have access to this kind of thing. You know what I mean? It depends on where you're at, who has it, who you know, who you are, etc. But this is pretty much word for word what you will learn in there. In order to fully understand identity and purpose, one must be educated on our history in California. It is each true soldado's responsibility to read, study, and memorize our history so that we may know and understand where we've come from. We must also recognize obstacles our elders and soldados before us have fought, endured, and overcome to get us where we are today. We must know and understand our history in order to have a true and wholehearted belief of our struggle, as well as to pass on the knowledge we have acquired. Now, as we begin this history, it must be understood that the prison system has changed a great deal from the beginning of our history to today. In the 1940s, the inmates ran the prisons and killings were common. Excuse me, I had a little ring. At this time, most of the activities behind the walls were controlled by a group of white supremacists known as the Bluebirds, later known as the Aryan Brotherhood, or AB, who are now found in many states across the country. The Bluebirds worked hand in hand with the K9, who at the time were mostly white, and racist mentalities to oppress all other minority groups. Many K9s were corrupt and assisted the Bluebirds in controlling the drug trade as well as prostitution and gambling rings. At this time, La Raza was gaining numbers behind the walls, but many were illiterate and could not speak English. The BB as well as the K9 used La Raza's lack of ability to speak English as a way to oppress them and in many ways take advantage of it. This oppression lasted for years, with the BB using violence to instill fear in La Raza. The Mexicans were not united and lacked any type of leadership. In the 1950s, an individual by the name of Rodolfo Cheyenne Cardenas, the Bakersfield, entered Tracy from CYA. Upon his arrival, he saw how La Raza was being treated and felt that this oppression must be stopped. He was a very smart man, and he began teaching the Raza English and all elements surrounding it. He was also skilled in martial arts and began training the people in combat and warfare. He understood that the Raza needed to stand up and start fighting back against these oppressors, and with the Raza's freedom in mind, he founded La M, which stands for El Mexicano Encarcelado, because it was a title all Mexicans behind the walls could identify with, and it gave all those willing to sacrifice for freedom a banner to unite under. And so the MA began recruiting soldados to fight against the Raza's oppressors. All Raza respected and admired Cheyenne and the MA for standing up for their freedom behind the walls. There were no boundaries separating Northern and Southern California. As La MA began making a stance within the prison system, and they began to organize and be recognized. As time went on, Cheyenne and La M began to realize how profitable the drug trade was behind the walls. They saw the power the drugs held over the people's minds and saw it as a way to gain power and control over others. And so Cheyenne mandated all MA members to bring in drugs. They had no choice because they committed themselves to the MA organization and they did not question orders. Once the drugs started coming in, the MA started gaining power and success. It was not enough for Cheyenne. In the late 1950s, he began asking all Raza to bring in drugs as well. He did not just want part of the drug trade, he wanted to control it. Some Raza did not bring in drugs for the MA, but some did, some did not, just for different reasons. Some just did not want to risk, some just not want to take the risk, and the families of others would not bring it in for them. It was at this time Cheyenne and the MA no longer acted in the best interest of the people, but rather took a hard turn contrary to the beliefs that the MA was originally founded upon. They were founded to defend and protect the Raza, but with a little power and success, Cheyenne became greedy and turned on his own people. In the early 1960s, Cheyenne made it mandatory for all Mexicans to bring in drugs. Those who did not were killed, raped, made to pay rent, or prostituted, and their families on the streets were threatened, raped, or killed. Cheyenne attempted to justify actions of the MA by saying La Raza owed them for their sacrifices, when in actuality, Cheyenne no longer acted for the people and his focus shifted from the freedom of the people to the control over the people. It wasn't long before Cheyenne and La MA controlled the drug trade, as well as the gambling and prostitution rings. In the years to come, La MA oppression grew worse. La Raza was not united, and La MA used that as a way to maintain control over them. Most Mexicans were scared to stand up for themselves and did whatever La MA ordered them to do because they were in fear of their families being victimized as well as themselves. And for many years, the MA took advantage of the Mexicans and controlled them with the iron fist. In 1964, a group of 5 individuals who called themselves La Familia Cinco decided to stand up and fight La MA oppression. They were formed haphazardly and lacked any type of COC. They had only one directive: to blast any MA member they came across. At this time, there were only 5 prisons: Tracy, Quentin, Folsom, Soledad, and Chino. Inmate clerks were able to use telephones to call other pintas, so it wasn't long before they became the primary targets for La MA and were subsequently killed. However, the fire they started burns to this day, and they are recognized as our forefathers and are true legends amongst our people. In 1965, an individual by the name of Robert Babel Sosa from Santa Barbara chose to continue La Familia Cinco's agenda. He understood in order to be successful, elements such as discreetness, training, and a strict COC would be essential. And so with his family and close, most trusted friends, he founded La Nuestra Familia. At first, the NF was low in numbers, but grew in time. The MA were aware of this organization, however, did not consider them a great threat. Many NF members were from both Northern and Southern California. As the years went on, La MA's oppression on the people continued to get worse and more feared. Nuestra Familia decided to take a stance against La Raza's oppressors. However, their intentions were unknown. They continued to build their forces while, in the meantime, trained and prepared themselves for war. In 1968, there were 2 back-to-back incidents involving 2 NF members who were gambling outside La MA's gambling tables. At the time, all Mexicans had to pay MA to gamble, and if they won, they had to pay a percentage of their profits. When La MA saw these 2 gambling, they confronted them, and the confrontation turned into an altercation, with the NF soldados not backing down. The second incident involved an individual by the name of Shoe Shine Joe. Joe used to shine boots and took pride in his work. He had a personal pair he took care of and kept in his cell. One day, upon returning to his cell, he noticed that the boots were missing. He saw that an MA member was wearing them, so he asked for his boots back. The MA member refused, and this is known as the straw that broke the camel's back. Our elders intervened and told La MA to back off, but the MA individual was scandalous and couldn't give up such a money-making business. What caught the attention of our elders was that La MA was only preying on La Raza and no other race, so the date was set for September 16, 1968. Our elders, La Nuestra Familia, declared war on the MA. The Carnales chose this day because it symbolizes Mexican Independence Day. It dates back to 1810 when Father Guadalupe Hidalgo in the town of Dolores, Mexico, called on the Raza to fight for freedom. And so on this day, the celebration was called by our elders for the Mexican Revolution. All Raza was invited, including La MA. This would catch them off guard. While they consumed drugs and alcohol, their security would be down. And so on this day, it was an all-out blitz. A war cry was heard all through Escalation. Our elders hit La MA in every pinta. Anybody who was vital to the MA organization was attacked, generals, captains, and others whose death would cause the most damage to the MA organization. The attack was very successful, La MA suffering many casualties. The K9 saw what occurred on this day and told reporters that the MA were dropping like flies. This is where the term Mosco become a derogatory term to identify MA members. On that day, our elders donned the red paño as a way to distinguish themselves from the enemy in that battle, as well as many to come. The MA always wore a blue paño because to them it represents the state blues worn by incarcerated Mexicans. The red flag later came to symbolize La Nuestra Familia struggle. The red paño has three colors, red, black, and white, each with a special meaning. The red symbolizes the bloodshed of ours as well as the enemy. The black symbolizes the hardship and sacrifices endured to the MA's wickedness and as a reminder of the many lives lost. And the white serving as a reminder to always keep our motives pure and for the people. After the initial battle on September 16th of 68, a fierce and deadly battle and war erupted between NF and the MA, with both sides suffering many losses. Cheyenne saw that he and the MA were losing everything they had due to all their resources having to be used for the war. Cheyenne pleaded with the NF for a peace treaty. The Carnales quickly refused because La Raza had suffered through too much for too long in the hands of the MA. Then, seeing it as a chance to take out the leadership, the NF agreed, but only if Cheyenne himself was present. Cheyenne agreed and the date was set, 1972, Chino, Palm Hall, 3rd tier. Cheyenne and one of his right-hand men, Bobby Zapato de Monteflores, arrived with another soldado from MA who acted as a bodyguard. The three NF soldados arrived, and as they approached, Cheyenne went to shake their hand. As he did so, three NF soldiers pulled out their pedazos. They began stabbing Cheyenne. The bodyguard ran, however, Cheyenne and Bobby Zapata were killed, and Cheyenne was thrown off the tier. When Cheyenne hit the floor, there were two C's waiting. They began stabbing him again to ensure his death. After Cheyenne was killed, La MA vowed revenge. In waiting, NF declared there would never be a peace treaty with the MA. After Cheyenne's death, his right-hand man and childhood friend, Joe Pegleg Morgan, stepped up as the head of La MA. It was around this time that the Africano George Jackson, a Black Panther and founder of the Black Guerrilla family, was killed. At the time, NF and BGF shared similar beliefs and fought together against their common enemies. With both the NF and the BGF fighting against them, the MA knew they would never be victorious and gain the power they once had. So in this time of weakness, they formed an alliance with the Aryan Brotherhood. Pegleg, who was white and had good relations with the whites, who of course hated the blacks, and they decided to fight together against the NF and the BGF. It must be understood that the NF never had an alliance with the BGF, rather solely fought together against common enemies. This war became the most vicious and deadly war in California prison history. The CDC administration couldn't do anything about it. They saw that a large part of the killings were being done by the NF. The C's left much death and destruction in their wake of their path and were greatly feared by all their enemies. Our elders were too deadly for this prison administration to handle. They were credited with 132 kills in 1 year. So our elders were slammed down in all pintas. They were taken to Tracy, East, and West halls. Our elders were the first to be taken off the main line and slammed like this ever. At this time, there was no such thing as indeterminate shoes, which didn't come for years later. While our elders were in Tracy, they had their own visiting, chow hall, etc. At this time, Tracy became an NF stronghold and nothing happened without NF approval. Hit squads were established in Tracy R&R under Perico Saldivar from Salinas. A vicious soldado with 17 confirmed kills credited to him. And any enemies coming into Tracy were dealt with properly. It was to hit, kill, hands-on was not an option. The C's had movement sheets and were aware of anyone coming or going. Whenever the opposition came to Tracy, the C's would run up to the bus and take them out. It got to the point where the opposition refused to get off the bus in shackles. The killings were constant and the canines would not intervene. They would just blow their whistles and yell and try to stop the C's. There were still some C's in other pintas. NF had strongholds in Tracy, Soledad, and Chino, while the MA had Tehachapi, San Quentin, and Folsom. In 1974, Vacaville was the Northern Reception Center. At this time, Chino was the reception center for Southern California. MA would get at Southern Raza and poison their minds, saying NF split the Raza and did not want to unite the people as one. They also poisoned them that the Raza from up north, whom they referred to as farmeros, were NF sympathizers, which was not the case. So the MA started recruiting Southern Raza as Sureños to be their foot soldiers. All Raza from Bakers and up went to Vacaville RC, and when they were transferred to other pintas, they wore bright green jumpsuits and stuck out like sore thumbs, thus becoming primary targets for the Sureños. In an effort to defend themselves, Northern Raza united as Nortenos and started fighting back. This is when the Norte Sur War began. Around this time, the CDC administration were pleading with the federal government to do something about the problem they were having. And so in 1976, the FBI stepped in with the RICO Act and began indicting many NF. These indictments were very serious with charges of murder, and several NF members dropped out and turned state's evidence. This is when the NF began another struggle, the struggle to get out of lockdown and back to the main lines. The NF began receiving word that the MA were infiltrating the Northern Raza and Norteños and trying to cause separation. They spread lies and gossip, saying someone from another town was a rat or causing problems, and they were trying to get them to hit each other. And that is one reason why set tripping, negative gossip, etc., are not to be tolerated amongst our people. Norteños began filling up the oils, but their war with the Sureños continued. They began asking the NF for guidance because they were greatly outnumbered and needed upper guidance. NF was sympathetic, and since the indictments, they had tightened up their security. In 1979, little Johnny was killed by Toro de Maravilla. Our elders then killed Toro in Tracy K Wing. In 1980, our elders were in Tracy East and West Halls. Two individuals arrived at Tracy K Wing for hitting La M. Upon arrival, they reported what was going on out on the main lines and again asked C's for the guidance and assistance for these Norteños. One of these individuals was Danny De Gastin from Bison, and the other is not worth mentioning because he later went out backwards. Upon word reaching East and West Halls, an investigation was ordered. The Cardinal Joseph Pinky Hernandez from Rancho Cucamonga and Ray Chino Hernandez de Chino, Mousy from San Jose, and Storks from Santa Barbara were sent to check it out. They made it to K-Wing by assaulting a K-9, which would happen once in a while when a K-9 would get out of line. Once in K-Wing, the investigation was conducted and completed. Also present were Sheldon Skip Villanueva de Sanjo, Daniel Storky Perez from Salas, and Cornelia Corny Tristan of Woodland. At the conclusion of the investigation, a 60-day filter was sent out to all Norteños to see if they would prove worthy. The filter stipulated that Norteños on the main line and those arriving on the main lines were to hit the MA. They had 60 days to do so. Shortly after the filter went out, the MA caught wind of it and tried to use it to manipulate the Norteños. They would tell them that they had been on the main lines for too long, and if they went back, they would get hit. Some fell for it and joined the enemy. The C's needed a way to reach the Norteños, and because they were slammed down, they needed the Norteños to come to them. And they did this so the Nuestra Familia Norteños Alliance was established and solidified. The Carnales gave the Norteños the red paño as something to stand for and to represent something to be proud of. They were also given the number 14 to distinguish themselves. In 1981, Corny de Woodland and Hector Copas Gallegos de Salas authorized the 14 bonds. They also authorized the plight, which later became the pledge and is now the format. There have been several revisions of both the bonds and the format since they were originally written in 1981. The C's began training certain Norteños in many different aspects so as to send them out to the main lines with proper knowledge to establish a safe and secure environment and ensure the advancement of our gente. In 1982, the K-9 started insinuating that a big move was going to be made, so our elders were able to prepare. In the summer of 1982, the move was made and the majority of the C's and a handful of Norteños were sent to Folsom, where they were given their own tiers, while a handful of the C's and a majority of the Norteños were sent to San Quentin in 3 busloads. When they got to R&R, they were taken off the bus, one at a time, and escorted into the classification office. There, the K-9 attempted to use fear tactics, saying it was an MA prison and they were going to be put on MA tiers. At this time, San Quentin was ran by the MA. NF had not been there since the late 60s, and once the interviews were completed, everyone was placed into 2 groups, the larger of which being those who PC'd up and the smaller being those who remained strong. The strong were spread throughout San Quentin and engaged on all enemies, eventually making it to the C section in the oil where they to the C's section in the oil where they went through 6 months of yard and tier warfare. Those present were Skip de Sanjo, Chino Ray Hernandez from Chino, Mad Dog Cervantes from Stockton, Dancing Bear from San Jose, Mousy from San Jose, Wino Perez from San Jose, Smiley from Oakland, among many others. The
Wines.
opposition was being hit everywhere. Hits were also being made on those who remained on the main lines for over 60 days, as the filter mandated. After 6 months of open tier warfare, the C's were given their own tiers. It was around this time in 1983 that a few of our elders created the Nuestra Raza and established the NR Foundation for those soldados who found it within their hearts to sacrifice their lives in order to ensure our raza's security, as well as and also well-being. It was for those who would not allow our people's rights to be infringed upon and those who desired to dedicate themselves to our raza's betterment and advancement behind the walls. It was for all soldados who believed in a greater justice for the people and were willing to make it happen. The Carnal Corny from Woodland is looked upon as the father of the NR. He implemented and enforced the NR Foundation and bylaws in Old Folsom 4A oil, and then filtered them out to San Quentin to be implemented for all Nortenos by the Carnal Skip from San Jose, with assistance of a few others, specifically Storky from Salas and Dancing Bear from San Jose. The NR created through a foundation and bylaws in order to prevent our people from being preyed upon by the enemy, as well as to form and unite ourselves amongst our gente and give us power as a strong front to make a stance for equality and justice, as well as to rise above the suppression of many years being utilized by those of our own heritage and background. The creation and establishment of Nuestra Raza alleviated the division amongst our people and brought all us together as a close-knit raza. The NR was for those soldados who did not have to make a lifetime commitment once back on the streets, but would always be dedicated to our struggle behind the walls. Within time, the NR became a stepping stone for those who wanted more. The NR was originally established with a Category 4 AR ranking system, but the system was later abolished. The NR symbol is an eagle with a dagger in its mouth, holding a sombrero in its right claw and an open Bible in its left claw with a red paño hanging over it. This represents the freedom we as a people seek and strive for: equal rights, equal opportunity, and also equal justice. The dagger represents our weapon of choice, a soldado's weapon that he chooses to live and die by. The sombrero represents our culture and heritage that dates back to the Mexican Revolution days. The Bible represents the book of knowledge, an education of our bonds and formats, which brings us together. The paño is of the three colors symbolizing the struggle. In 1983, the first soldado of the NR left the oils to establish the main lines. Once manpower was established on the main lines, it was filtered that the NR rules and regulation, 14 bonds, were mandatory for all to follow. There were those who spoke against it because they thought the NF would demand a lifetime commitment from them, but that was not the case. These individuals were Al from Bakersfield, Joe the Boss Alvarado, and his nephew Flaco, and another individual who later saw the error of his ways and is not worth mentioning, but remained good until this day. On January 22nd, 1984, the NR suffered its first two casualties of war, with Joe Paulo Prigley de Sacramento and Angry Bear of Orange County in Tracy prison.
This day 84?
Excuse me?
This say 84?
January 22nd, 1984.
That happened. What's his name? Got killed in 89. That's the error.
Oh, yep. This day has come to symbolize the birth of the Norteno movement and is to be celebrated in remembrance of those two soldados, as well as all those who have sacrificed their lives. Later that year, there was a hit made on a yard and the canines didn't see it happen. They only saw the victim on the ground. The canine flipped out and started yelling for someone to pick him up and put him in the sally port, but nobody moved. There was a C by the name of Sleepy from Hollister in that area that had a back brace and an arm brace. The canine thought that he may have been involved. The canine called Sleepy up to the gunners and shot him in the face. Sleepy was binded by this, and this indictment kicked off the only time we have went to war against the canines. It began with 3 days and 2 full nights of burning and flooding the tiers. Every time a canine came in, they were bombed, speared, crossbowed, hit, etc. 15 canines, including a sergeant, were hit. The administration couldn't handle it. Eventually, the warden, associate warden, captain, and lieutenant came and apologized. Sleepy eventually won $1 million lawsuit. In 1985 in San Quentin, a C by the name of Rocky Martinez from San Jose was killed by a PC named Bear. Rocky was a tier attender and had taken a package for Bear on the night before he was to be released, which was New Year's. He was on the tier drinking and was not paying attention to his surroundings. He was speared by Bear with a fatal blow. Also in 1985, the 60-day filter ended and a weed out process began. It was seen that far too many unworthy individuals were walking around with the bonds, formats, squad procedures, and other relevant paperwork. It was no longer mandatory for all to follow them. Only a chosen few were deemed worthy to become part of this elite circle. Also in 1985, the prison administration began using the indeterminate shoe to slam down others such as the A, B, MA, and BGF. This caused a great deal of hardship for other group segments because they were used to being on the main line, while our elders had already been slammed down for many years prior. In 1986-87, another big move was made from San Quentin to Tehachapi Shoe. At this time, the Texas Syndicate shared the yard with the MA. Eventually, they ended up getting into it with each other. Later, our elders let them come to their yard to see what they were about. Once on the yard, our elders were able to see how scandalous the Texas Syndicate really were, and so the C's moved on them, nearly killing them all. The Texas Syndicate is not what it once was. There is still a limited number spread out here and there. However, most are just degenerates claiming to be from Texas. It was around this time that the administration labeled Nuestra Raza a prison gang, calling it Northern Structure. They began validating those who felt that were members and associates. Throughout the years, the prison administration has continued to target C's and Nortenos. They have greatly abused and misused the validation process. At the same time that the Northern Structure became a validated prison gang, so did the Consolidated Crip Organization and the United Blood Nation. Both the CCO and the UBN are now dysfunctional. In 1988-89, the situation with Fresno began to boil over. It had been building for quite some time, but this event was the last straw. At this time in San Quentin, there was a lot of manpower from Fresno. A young Norteno came into the household, and two brothers, Crackers and Indio Vindiola, from Fresno asked if they could take him under their wing to school him and train him, which was agreed. However, instead of helping him, they began to take advantage of him by utilizing him for money, packages, etc. After the authority of the household caught wind of this, he approached Indio and Crackers and explained to them that these type of actions are the reasons we went to war with the MA in the first place. They were told to stop, but they refused, saying it was a Fresno thing. Because of all this, they were down on the yard for taking a negative stance against the authority in charge. A few days later, they speared a Norteno on the tier. Crackers and Indio began poisoning the minds of any Nortenos from Fresno that would listen. They would tell them that the NF was using them to do their own thing. Another reason it built up to this point it is now is because many from Fresno would complain when their time came to contribute and sacrifice. At one time, Fresno was headquarters for all NF street functions, but it was eventually lost due to dropouts in that area poisoning the mindset of the youth.
Pretty interesting. My perspective of it off top, bro, is I could tell that the writer of this Historia is probably from around 78 to 80. His history from that point forward was pretty accurate, bro. But in the beginning part of the history, bro, there's a couple things that stood out that we just have to point out. One, I've always been told that it was Wedo Buff Flores was the one that initiated the MA.
Yeah, me too.
The Cheyenne became an influential member later on. I don't think he was even recruited. I don't know if he was recruited in YA as well, though. But Wedo Buff, I believe, started in 57. Some say 55. The other thing that stood out to me, right, was the boot incident. Shoeshine Joe, it was Mad Dog Padilla. He's the one that had the issue with the boots and stuff, the whole issue with the robot and all that when he got stabbed. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. And what people don't know about the Historia, which I understand why the NF has put this out there, but the whole incident over the boots, the rioting when Cricket Gallegos got killed, that actually happened September 15th, 1968. Because on September 16th, 1968, they were actually on lockdown, believe it or not. So the issues that happened on Alpine, the fifth tier or fourth tier, whatever it was, happened like, on the 15th, you know what I mean? All the other stuff, man, too, it's I've read this exact history before. I've seen it word for word. This was a history that they would put out for the Nortenos, I remember. There's a little bit more details if you see history from the NF side, but which makes me believe that this person, yeah,
Which I do happen to have.
yeah, yeah, all this stuff. So so in the issue, okay, everything, okay, in the part about Black Bob starting the Nuestra Familia, not Black Bob, Babo, that's not true as well. We already know that, you know, Little John from the Little Valley, Lips, Chalo, all those individuals, and there's also issues that the Familia Cinco was relevant to like 1976, believe it or not. I've seen letters, I've seen their rosters of a Familia Cinco by CDC that was like in 1973. So there's also issues. I think Black Bob's the one that put out a lot of this history, believe it or not. And so that's always been the discrepancy about certain things. Anything post this era, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, I disagree with a lot of points that I've seen in there. There's a lot of things I don't agree. You know what I mean? Including the 132 murders in 1 year. You know what I'm saying? That's a high figure. Was that used to pretty much, influence the gente? I don't know. Was this written by an individual that wasn't present and he's only being filtering out what he's been taught? I believe so, because a lot of his history from 79 on was pretty accurate. The 60-day filter, if everybody remembers, I've addressed that in previous episodes, that there was a 68 time period when you got out to the mainline as Norteno to go handle your business. The issues in Tracy, San Quentin, the filters and all that, all accurate. Brad Prigley, as we already know, he was killed, Paulo from Sakura, he was killed January 22nd, 1989, not 84. But the honorary date is given as January 22nd, 1984 for Nuestra Raza. That's just a date that they implement to celebrate. But, all the stuff that post 1980 is pretty accurate. It's how I've been schooled. And like anytime you have any history, you're going to have some issues, you know what I mean? Like, the previous stuff though, man, there's a lot of things though I have to disagree with, bro, just to be honest with you. And I got to do a disclaimer and just point that out, bro.
Yeah, I was just using that. I came across that. I was using that as an example of the way we are taught things and, the wording and, you can see the pump up points. You can see you can see all that stuff, but those are the kinds of things that we would break down, during our essay assignments, our flechas, our juntas. We would break down like a paragraph at a time. We would get a writing assignment on it. This isn't, we didn't put this out here as a lesson of, accuracy of how things went. This is just like a learning experience, that would give you a good idea of how we were actually schooled in prison. Now, this is the kind of stuff we would receive. Is it always factual? There's not too much that's 100% besides maybe the Constitution. You know what I mean? There's no altering, there's no interpretations. History can only be told by certain people who were there, not secondhand information, not the homeboy told the homeboy this and this is how it went. There's going to be misinterpretations and mistakes. So this is, like Flaco said, as far as the disclaimer, there's a lot of good stuff in what I read. Don't get me wrong. But there's also a lot of
everything before 76 is pretty bad, bro. You know what I'm saying? I'm just going to keep it 100, bro.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to sit there and fill the listener with lies and BS, man. As far as factual stuff that actually happened everything that's what I'm saying. Whoever wrote this, you can already tell it's written by an elder. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to have to say that they probably hit the system in 79 or 80. Throughout 40 years, history gets distorted, man. But the issue about, Bobo being the one that started the NF, that's all false information. They were already recognized way before that, man. There was issues about Bobo being recruited into the NF by none other than Chalo. Because, you know what I mean? Before I was told that there's pictures I have of Nuestra Familia Mexicano, which was also, they dropped the Mexicano part from my understanding is because they started to allow other Latinos, other races that were not Mexicano into the organization. Before it was all raza, push. I've heard the blooming flower was something that was also put out there, and a lot of that was created by CDCR. You know what I'm saying? I believe that there were some groups that had like-minded ideas and ideals, and we could talk about numerous names for them. Let's just say that there was like-minded people that were against the MA aggression. You know what I'm saying? And the thing that I seen, right, when I listen to different stories, like say from like Mundo's channel or from MMA, you know, ex-MMA members or people that know, or from other books that I've read, is that both sides have their own propaganda. You like that, huh, Ro? Propaganda?
Got it.
You know what I
Bam,
mean?
bam.
Each side has their own propaganda. You know what I mean? But there's gonna be there's gonna be some truths to it along the lines, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing is this is pretty much written as like pro NF, you know what I mean? Let's indoctrinate these youngsters, let's give them that fire, let's get them to strive. This is what we're about. And then the MMA is gonna have their own way of educating their own little history about what they say about the NF. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, man, it was interesting. I like the stuff that was post 1978, but the stuff before that, bro, I'm just gonna keep. I didn't like it too much, bro. There's too many errors.
I agree. Yeah, I'd like to run all this, but it's a little too hot for the airwaves, unfortunately.
Well, you may have to do it anyways, bro.
It's some good stuff, bro.
It's
Like,
good. I know.
it's like that championship. This is that championship.
I mean, Rojo's gonna read it. Watch eventually. Well, once we get 50,000 subscribers, it's worth it, man. We're gonna do it then.
Hey, right?
I mean,
Hey, and I'm subject to being bribed as well, you know? I mean, we just keep it 100. All right, YouTube, man.
happy Monday, man.
You guys have asked us what it's like, you know, as far as how we're really taught history in the Pintas, what we got to break down. That's a perfect example.
That is, bro.
Maybe it's not accurate. And check this out, man. I could be in San Quentin in 1995 and get that. I could be in Pelican Bay in 96 and get this. I could get released to the main line, end up in High Desert in 2002, get something a little bit different. Nothing's really necessarily going to be perfect when you're talking about history, man. Because a lot of incidents are passed down. The people involved were dead. People weren't at the same prisons as them. And it's just, oh, did you hear about that? One. Did you hear about that? Two. It changes a little bit.
One more thing, bro. David Zapata, he was killed. He was a Mexican mafia member. He was from Robert Zapata. He's mentioned in there being with Cheyenne.
Yeah.
He was killed, but he was not killed in Palm Hall at the same time as Cheyenne. He was killed by chicken legs. Daniel Loza from Chino, who was an NF member. So there's a lot of stuff in there that's like, you know what I mean? Like just minor errors. I don't know, you know what I mean? If this is just, you know what I mean? Just little things like that I noticed in this field, bro.
So that's why, like, when you hear people like, well, he said this, he said that, hey, you work with what you got. You know, it ain't like you could walk around in there and keep records out in plain sight, you know, like textbooks about what you did with your criminal group, because they'll take that stuff. It's difficult, man. You know, while a lot of things are spot on, some are going to be off, some are going to be, you know, the wrong date, the wrong person. It's going to happen. The gist of it is accurate. You know, the essence of it is accurate. But that's the kind of stuff we did. We brought it to you. Have a good day, YouTube. Your boy Rojo will be on about 7 p.m. for the live. Have a great Monday. We appreciate you guys with the utmost.